The Challenger report is out, and it is a pretty dismal one. 108,435 job cuts announced in the month of January. That is the highest January total since 2009. As far as the numbers go, it's up 205%.
Something strange is happening in the U.S. job market. Millions of jobs are disappearing, but you rarely see the headlines. Companies aren't announcing massive layoffs like they used to. Instead, they're quietly cutting workers behind the scenes, hiring freezes, automation, restructuring, and the real numbers are far bigger than most people realize. One of the biggest reasons layoffs in 2026 look different is the rise of what analysts call silent layoffs. In past recessions, companies announce massive job cuts in one headline, sometimes eliminating tens of thousands of positions at once. Today, many corporations are avoiding that kind of publicity. Instead, they quietly remove positions through hiring freezes, attrition, and restructuring. Workers leave, but their roles are never replaced. This strategy dramatically reduces public attention while still shrinking the workforce. For example, if a company with 100,000 employees simply stops replacing workers who leave, it could eliminate 5,000 to 10,000 jobs within a year without ever issuing a formal layoff announcement. Labor economists show that employee turnover in large companies averages 10 to 15% annually. When companies freeze hiring, that turnover becomes a hidden job cut. Across the U.S. economy, even a 5% reduction in replacement hiring could quietly remove millions of jobs nationwide. Another tactic companies use is eliminating open roles that were previously budgeted but never filled. Many corporations listed thousands of job openings during the hiring boom of 2021 to 2022. In 2025 and 2026, those postings are simply disappearing. Because these cuts happen gradually, they rarely trigger media headlines. Yet the impact is enormous. Workers looking for jobs suddenly discover that positions that existed just a year earlier have quietly vanished. This shift means layoffs are no longer always visible events. Instead, they are becoming gradual reductions playing out across months or even years, making the labor market appear stable, while millions of jobs quietly disappear. Another major reason layoffs in 2026 look unusual is the widespread use of corporate hiring freezes. Rather than announcing layoffs, many companies are simply stopping new hiring altogether. Hiring freezes are powerful because they reduce jobs without triggering negative headlines or investor panic. When companies freeze hiring, they allow turnover to shrink their workforce over time. U.S. corporations collectively post millions of job openings every year, but in 2025 and 2026, those listings began to decline sharply. Labor market data shows that U.S. job openings dropped from over 12 million during the post-pandemic boom to closer to 8 to 9 million. That decline represents millions of jobs that vanished before they were ever filled. Major companies in technology, finance, media, and consulting have confirmed hiring slowdowns. Instead of recruiting aggressively like they did during the economic expansion of 2021 to 2022, many businesses are now only filling critical roles. This shift dramatically affects new graduates and workers attempting to change careers. When hiring freezes occur, job seekers face fewer opportunities even if they never hear about layoffs. The result is a labor market where unemployment may appear stable, but the number of available jobs shrinks dramatically. Economists sometimes call this phenomenon labor market tightening from the demand side. It means companies are reducing their demand for workers without formally cutting their existing staff. For millions of Americans searching for work, the experience feels the same as a recession. They submit applications, attend interviews, and search job boards, only to find that many positions have quietly been frozen or removed entirely. One of the most unusual features of the current labor market is that layoffs are increasingly affecting white-collar professionals rather than primarily blue-collar workers. During previous recessions, industries like construction, manufacturing, and retail often experienced the biggest job losses. In 2026, however, many layoffs are hitting office jobs, corporate roles, and knowledge workers directly. Technology companies, consulting firms, banks, media organizations, and corporate headquarters have been reducing staff across multiple departments. These include roles in marketing, recruiting, project management, human resources, and middle management. Several factors are driving this trend. First, Many companies dramatically expanded their corporate teams during the pandemic. As businesses moved online and demand surged, firms hired large numbers of professionals to manage digital operations, data analysis, and remote work systems. Now that growth has slowed, companies are reconsidering whether they still need such large corporate staffs. Second, digital tools and automation allow fewer employees to handle tasks that once required large teams. Software platforms now automate scheduling, accounting, analytics, and communication. As a result, companies often determine that entire departments can operate with fewer workers. Labor analysts have noted that job cuts in sectors like technology and finance have eliminated hundreds of thousands of white-collar roles in recent years. But because these layoffs are spread across hundreds of companies rather than a single industry collapse, the trend receives far less public attention. For many professionals, this shift has been both surprising and unsettling. Corporate careers that once seemed stable are now experiencing the same uncertainty that factory workers and retail employees faced in previous economic downturns. The technology sector has played a major role in shaping the current wave of layoffs. During the pandemic years, tech companies expanded rapidly as digital services became essential for work, communication, and entertainment. However, when economic growth slowed, companies began reevaluating those staffing levels carefully. Beginning in 2023 and continuing through 2025 and 2026, many technology firms initiated large restructuring programs. These programs often included layoffs, hiring freezes, and the cancellation of experimental projects that no longer fit company priorities. Industry estimates suggest that hundreds of thousands of technology workers worldwide have lost their jobs during this period. The cuts affected engineers, designers, marketers, recruiters, and operations staff across the board. But what makes these layoffs different is that many companies are simultaneously investing in automation and artificial intelligence systems. While reducing human staff, firms are spending billions of dollars on AI tools designed to handle coding assistance, customer support, and data processing. This shift creates a paradox in the labor market. The technology sector continues to grow in terms of revenue and influence, yet the number of workers required to run these systems is shrinking. Another factor driving layoffs is the collapse of certain pandemic-era business models. Online services that thrived during lockdowns have seen slower growth as normal life resumed. As a result, the technology industry is undergoing one of the largest workforce adjustments in its history. One of the most significant forces reshaping employment in 2026 is the rapid expansion of artificial intelligence automation. Businesses across multiple industries are deploying AI systems capable of performing tasks that previously required human workers. These technologies can write reports, generate marketing content, analyze data, answer customer questions, and assist with computer programming tasks. Because AI tools operate continuously and require no salaries, companies see them as a way to dramatically reduce costs. Once an AI system is in place, it can perform work that might have previously required entire teams of employees. Customer service is one of the first sectors experiencing major disruption. AI-powered chatbots and virtual assistants now handle millions of interactions that once required call center agents throughout the day. In marketing and media, automated systems can produce articles, advertisements, and social media content within seconds. Software tools can assist programmers by writing and debugging code. Economic research groups estimate that tens of millions of jobs worldwide could eventually be affected by AI automation, with certain administrative and office roles among the most vulnerable to replacement. However, the impact is not always immediate layoffs. Instead, companies often reduce hiring for roles they believe AI will soon replace. Over time, entire job categories begin to shrink without any dramatic announcements. For workers, this transformation creates deep uncertainty about which careers will remain stable in the future. Some positions will evolve to work alongside AI systems, while others may disappear entirely. This technological shift is one key reason layoffs today appear so different from those in previous economic downturns. One of the least visible aspects of the 2026 layoff wave is the massive reduction of contract workers, freelancers, and gig employees. Unlike traditional employees, contractors are often not counted in official layoff announcements. When companies decide to cut costs, these workers are usually the first to be removed. Over the past decade, corporations dramatically increased their reliance on flexible labor. In the United States, over 60 million Americans now participate in the gig economy, according to estimates from labor research organizations. This includes freelancers, independent contractors, delivery drivers, consultants, and temporary workers. During economic slowdowns, companies can simply choose not to renew contracts or reduce the number of contractors they hire. Because these workers are not technically employees, their job losses rarely appear in public layoff announcements. For example, a large company may employ 10,000 full-time workers, but also rely on thousands of contract workers for customer support, IT services, design, and logistics. When budgets tighten, cutting those contracts can eliminate hundreds of jobs almost instantly. Another factor is the growing use of global remote contractors. Businesses often outsource work to freelancers in lower-cost countries. When demand slows, those contracts disappear quickly without any formal notice. Because these job cuts are dispersed across millions of workers rather than large corporate announcements, the scale of the reduction is difficult to track. For many people, this means the labor market feels far weaker than official statistics suggest. Contract workers often face sudden income loss without severance, unemployment benefits, or advance warning, making them among the most vulnerable groups in today's workforce. Retail remains one of the largest employers in the United States, providing work for over 15 million Americans. However, the sector has been undergoing a massive transformation, and in 2026, that shift is accelerating. Across the country, large retail chains are closing stores as shopping continues to move online. When physical stores shut down, entire teams of employees lose their jobs, including cashiers, managers, stock workers, and security staff. Industry analysts estimate that thousands of retail locations close each year, particularly among department stores and shopping mall retailers. Each closure can eliminate 20 to 100 jobs depending on store size. The rise of e-commerce is a major reason for this shift. Online shopping now represents more than 15% of total retail sales in the United States, and that share continues to grow. Companies increasingly invest in warehouses and delivery logistics rather than traditional storefronts. As a result, many malls and retail districts that once employed thousands of workers are experiencing declining customer traffic. Some malls have closed entirely, leaving large commercial spaces empty for months or years. Retail job losses tend to occur gradually rather than through massive single layoffs. Companies may close 50 stores one year, another 80 the next, slowly reducing their workforce without generating major headlines. Because these closures happen across hundreds of companies nationwide, they often receive limited national attention. Yet collectively, the impact on employment is significant. For many communities, retail jobs once provided accessible employment without requiring advanced education. As these positions disappear, workers must find jobs in sectors demanding entirely different skills. Another important factor behind the current wave of job losses is the slowdown in logistics and freight transportation, industries that expanded rapidly during the pandemic years. When online shopping surged in 2020 and 2021, demand for shipping, trucking, and warehouse services exploded. Companies hired thousands of workers to move goods across the country and meet growing consumer demand. However, as consumer spending slowed and supply chains stabilized, freight demand dropped significantly across the board. The trucking industry alone employs over 3 million drivers in the United States, making it one of the largest occupations in the country. But freight volumes have fluctuated dramatically, and many trucking companies have struggled with lower shipping rates. Industry reports indicate that hundreds of trucking companies have closed in recent years, particularly smaller carriers that cannot survive when freight prices fall below sustainable levels. Warehousing employment has also slowed after several years of rapid growth. During the pandemic, companies built large distribution networks to handle increased online shopping demand. Now that activity has stabilized, many warehouses are reducing their staff levels. Transportation layoffs often occur quietly through reduced hours, smaller routes, and fewer contracts rather than through mass job cuts and formal announcements. Drivers may find themselves working fewer miles, warehouse employees may receive fewer shifts, and logistics companies may simply stop hiring new workers as demand softens. Because transportation is deeply connected to the broader economy, changes in freight activity often signal wider economic slowdowns. When fewer goods are being shipped, it typically indicates that consumer demand and industrial production are both weakening significantly. Manufacturing once formed the backbone of the American middle class, employing millions of workers in factories across the country. Although the sector still supports around 13 million jobs in the United States, it has been shrinking and transforming for decades. In 2026, manufacturing job losses are occurring for two main reasons: automation and global competition. Modern factories increasingly rely on robotics and advanced machinery to produce goods. These systems can operate continuously and perform tasks with extreme precision. While automation increases productivity, it often significantly reduces the number of workers needed to run a facility. For example, a manufacturing plant that once required 1,000 workers may now operate with only a few hundred employees using automated systems throughout production. Another factor is international competition. Many companies manufacture products in countries where labor costs are significantly lower. When factories relocate overseas, entire communities can lose their primary source of employment overnight. Manufacturing layoffs often appear gradual because companies rarely close all operations at once. Instead, they reduce shifts, eliminate departments, or replace retiring workers with machines over time. Over time, these small adjustments can dramatically shrink the total workforce. Economic data shows that the United States has lost millions of manufacturing jobs since the early 2000s, even as industrial output has continued to grow due to automation and improved efficiency. For workers without specialized technical skills, the decline of manufacturing jobs can be particularly challenging. Many new positions in advanced factories require expertise in robotics, engineering, or computer systems, leaving traditional workers with shrinking options and difficult choices about their futures. Another reason layoffs in 2026 appear different is the language companies use when announcing workforce reductions. Instead of using the word layoffs, many corporations now describe job cuts as restructuring, optimization, or efficiency initiatives. These terms often signal the same outcome: fewer employees. Companies use this language because it sounds less alarming to investors, customers, and the general public. Rather than announcing a crisis, executives frame workforce reductions as strategic decisions to improve productivity or adapt to changing market conditions. Corporate restructuring can include multiple actions at once. Companies may merge departments, eliminate overlapping roles, close certain business units, or outsource specific tasks to lower-cost providers. For example, if two departments perform similar functions, a company might combine them into one team. This often results in fewer managers and fewer employees overall, with no formal layoff announcement required. Large corporations sometimes restructure entire divisions, affecting thousands of workers across multiple locations. Because the changes occur gradually or across different departments, they may not appear as a single large layoff event in the news. Another tactic is offering voluntary buyouts or early retirement packages to older employees. This reduces the workforce while avoiding direct and public layoffs entirely. By framing job cuts as strategic changes rather than economic problems, companies attempt to maintain confidence among investors and financial markets. For workers, however, the result is always the same. Positions disappear, departments shrink, job listings vanish, and job security becomes far less certain than it once was. The corporate language may sound different, but the experience for affected employees remains deeply difficult. Another reason layoffs in 2026 look different is that companies are no longer announcing huge job cuts all at once. Instead of eliminating thousands of workers in one announcement, many companies are laying off small groups every few months throughout the year. This strategy spreads layoffs across time, which reduces media attention and public backlash. A company might eliminate 200 jobs in January, 150 in March, and another 300 later in the year, rather than announcing one large layoff event. While each individual cut seems small, the total number of lost jobs can become enormous over time. If hundreds of large companies each cut a few hundred workers every quarter, the combined effect can reach hundreds of thousands or even millions of jobs nationwide. Businesses often use internal restructuring cycles to implement these reductions. Every quarter, Managers review budgets and staffing levels. If profits decline or costs increase, departments are asked to reduce headcount. Because these layoffs are scattered across different months and locations, they rarely dominate the news cycle for long. However, workers within those companies experience ongoing uncertainty as layoffs continue quietly around them. Labor economists call this rolling layoffs. Instead of a sudden economic shock, the labor market experiences a slow but persistent reduction in available jobs over many months. For employees, this environment can be especially stressful. Workers may hear rumors of layoffs repeatedly without knowing when their own department might be affected next. Over time, these smaller layoffs accumulate into major reductions rivaling past recessions, but without the dramatic headlines that once accompanied mass announcements. Remote work expanded dramatically during the pandemic. By 2021 and 2022, tens of millions of Americans were working from home, and many companies embraced remote hiring from locations across the country. However, in recent years, many corporations have begun reversing these policies. Employers are increasingly requiring workers to return to offices, sometimes 3 to 5 days per week, regardless of where employees live. While this shift is often presented as a productivity initiative, it also has another effect. It pushes some employees to quit voluntarily without being laid off. Workers who relocated during the remote work boom may now live hundreds or even thousands of miles away from company headquarters. When companies demand a return to the office, many employees cannot realistically relocate again on short notice. As a result, some workers resign rather than comply with new policies. From the company's perspective, this reduces the workforce without technically laying anyone off directly. This trend is especially common in industries such as technology, finance, consulting, and media, where remote work was most widely adopted during the pandemic years. Research suggests that companies implementing strict return-to-office policies often see higher resignation rates, which allows them to shrink their workforce more naturally. Another factor is that remote positions attract global competition. Companies can hire workers from anywhere, which means they may choose candidates from regions with significantly lower salary expectations. This dynamic increases pressure on employees in higher-cost cities. For some workers, remote positions that once seemed secure are becoming less certain as companies restructure their workforce around new office attendance requirements. The startup economy played a major role in job creation during the last decade. Thousands of new companies launched with backing from venture capital investors who were willing to take calculated risks on innovative and disruptive ideas. At its peak, global venture capital investment exceeded hundreds of billions of dollars per year, supporting millions of jobs in technology, media, finance, and other emerging industries. However, the overall startup funding environment has changed dramatically in recent years. As interest rates rose and investors became more cautious about risk, venture capital funding declined sharply. When funding slows, startups face immediate pressure to reduce costs. Many young companies depend heavily on investor money to pay salaries and keep their operations running day to day. Without new funding rounds, startups often have no choice but to lay off employees or shut down operations entirely. Industry reports show that thousands of startups worldwide have reduced staff or closed operations in recent years. Some companies eliminated 30 to 50% of their workforce in order to survive. These layoffs affect a wide range of workers, including software engineers, marketing teams, product managers, designers, and support staff who joined with high hopes. Because startups are smaller than major corporations, their layoffs rarely receive widespread media coverage or public attention. Yet collectively, the number of affected workers is enormous. The collapse of startup funding also reduces future job creation across the economy. When fewer new companies launch successfully, there are fewer opportunities for workers to move into growing and innovative industries with competitive salaries and strong career potential. One of the most important forces behind layoffs in 2026 is the impact of high interest rates on business decisions. Interest rates influence how expensive it is for companies to borrow money. When rates rise, loans become more costly, and businesses become more cautious about expanding their operations. In recent years, central banks increased interest rates to combat rising inflation. While this policy can help stabilize prices, it also slows broader economic activity significantly. For companies, higher borrowing costs affect many important decisions. Businesses may delay building new facilities, opening new locations, or launching projects because financing has become more expensive. When expansion plans are postponed or canceled, the need for additional workers declines immediately. Large corporations often rely on borrowed money to fund growth initiatives. If interest rates increase significantly, those projects may no longer appear profitable enough to pursue. This leads companies to focus on cost reduction rather than expansion, which frequently includes reducing staff across multiple departments. Industries such as real estate, construction, technology, and manufacturing are particularly sensitive to interest rate changes because they require very large upfront investments to grow. When borrowing costs remain high for extended periods, companies may freeze hiring, cancel projects, and reduce their workforce to maintain profitability and investor confidence. Even profitable companies may cut jobs during these periods in order to reassure investors that they are carefully controlling expenses. As a result, high interest rates can trigger widespread layoffs across multiple industries, even when the broader economy does not appear to be in a traditional recession by standard economic measures. Many corporations are also restructuring their internal hierarchy by eliminating entire layers of middle management across their organizations. Middle managers traditionally supervise teams, coordinate projects, and serve as a communication bridge between executives and everyday employees. However, modern digital tools have changed how companies operate at every level. Project management software, communication platforms, and automated reporting systems allow teams to collaborate directly without needing as many supervisors watching over every step. As a result, some companies are deciding that fewer management layers are necessary to run their operations efficiently. This process is sometimes called corporate flattening. Instead of having multiple levels of managers between entry-level employees and top executives, companies restructure to create smaller, leaner leadership teams. For example, a department that previously had a director, several managers, and multiple team leads may now operate with only one or two supervisors overseeing the entire group. While this can streamline decision-making and reduce internal delays, it also eliminates many high-paying professional roles that workers spent years working toward. Middle managers often earn salaries significantly higher than entry-level employees, so removing these positions can reduce overall payroll costs quite quickly. Large corporations undergoing restructuring may remove thousands of management positions across their global operations at once. For workers who built long careers climbing corporate hierarchies, this trend creates serious uncertainty. Promotion opportunities shrink, and experienced managers may struggle to find similar roles at other companies. As businesses continue adopting digital collaboration tools and automation systems, the demand for traditional middle management positions may continue declining, reshaping what corporate career advancement actually looks like. Despite widespread layoffs and hiring slowdowns, official unemployment statistics sometimes appear relatively stable. This creates real confusion about the true health of the labor market for many Americans. Unemployment numbers measure only people actively searching for work who cannot find jobs. They do not fully capture other forms of economic hardship affecting millions of households. For example, many workers who lose full-time jobs accept part-time work, gig jobs, or temporary contracts to cover their basic expenses. These individuals are technically counted as employed, even though their income may be far lower than before. Economists refer to this situation as underemployment. Millions of Americans now rely on multiple gig jobs to replace the income from one full-time position. Workers may drive for delivery services, freelance online, or take short-term contracts just to cover monthly expenses. Another factor is discouraged workers. Some people stop searching for jobs after repeated rejection, which removes them from unemployment statistics entirely even though they still need work. Labor force participation rates provide another important clue about hidden unemployment. If fewer people are working or actively seeking work, it can signal deeper problems within the overall job market. Because of these ongoing challenges, the official unemployment rate may not fully reflect the number of Americans struggling to find stable and well-paying employment in today's economy. For many workers, the reality of the labor market feels far more difficult than statistics suggest. The shift toward gig work, contract jobs, and part-time employment has created a new form of economic insecurity affecting millions of American households every single day.
Our team coverage continues now with the U.S. Supreme Court ruling cities can arrest and fine those who are homeless if they sleep outside. The High Court handing down that ruling today, siding with the town of Grants Pass, Oregon, and its anti-camping ordinances.
Right now, in one of the richest countries in the world, working families are being pushed out of their homes and into parking lots, and now even those are being taken away. This isn't a housing shortage anymore. It's a survival crisis, and it's spreading faster than anyone wants to admit. California has become ground zero for RV homelessness enforcement in America. With over 180,000 unhoused residents and an estimated 72,000 people living in vehicles, the state has more vehicle dwellers than any other in the country. Cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, San Jose, and Oakland have become testing grounds for aggressive new policies. Since 2023, more than 40 California cities have passed or expanded overnight parking bans. Many restrict parking to just 2 to 4 hours, even in industrial areas. Violations can lead to fines ranging from $75 to $500, with towing fees often exceeding $2,000. Los Angeles alone issued over 35,000 vehicle habitation citations in 2024. San Diego doubled its towing budget to $15 million. San Jose expanded its no overnight zones by 60%. At the state level, lawmakers tied homelessness funding to enforcement cooperation. Cities that clear RV zones receive priority grants for cleanup and infrastructure projects. Fire risk is frequently cited as justification. California reported over 1,400 RV-related fires in 2024, strengthening political support for removals. But housing supply hasn't kept pace with demand. The state is short over 1.2 million affordable housing units. Only 1 in 4 displaced RV residents is offered temporary shelter after removal. For many Californians, living in an RV has shifted from a survival strategy to criminal status almost overnight. The enforcement infrastructure continues expanding while housing alternatives remain scarce. This combination has created a system where working families and displaced individuals face constant citations, mounting debt, and nowhere legal to park. Oregon's RV crisis is shaped by a unique combination of city enforcement and federal land closures. Portland, Eugene, and Medford have expanded anti-camping and vehicle dwelling rules since 2023. Portland alone cleared over 600 encampment sites in 2024, affecting thousands of RV residents. At the same time, federal agencies including the Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management began closing long-term vehicle encampments on public land. These areas had served as informal safe zones for years. Between 2023 and 2025, more than 15 major federal sites were shut down across Oregon. Court battles quickly followed. Advocacy groups sued cities over sweep policies, arguing that shelter shortages made enforcement unconstitutional. While some cases temporarily slowed removals, most were eventually dismissed. Oregon spends over $2 billion annually on homelessness, yet only 18% goes toward permanent housing construction. The rest funds emergency response and enforcement operations. Vehicle dwellers now face pressure from both directions. Cities restrict parking in urban areas, while rural federal land is increasingly off-limits. As a result, people are pushed into smaller and more dangerous locations, including areas under bridges, flood zones, and remote highways. Oregon's system doesn't eliminate homelessness. Instead, it redistributes displaced people from one location to another without providing viable alternatives. The constant displacement disrupts employment, healthcare access, and family stability. Many RV residents report moving every few days to avoid citations, creating a cycle of instability that makes it nearly impossible to secure permanent housing or maintain steady work. Washington has become a national battleground over encampment enforcement policies. Seattle, Tacoma, and Spokane expanded vehicle dwelling restrictions after 2022. Seattle alone conducted over 1,200 encampment removals in 2024. RV zones were eliminated near schools, parks, and transit hubs. Signs reading, "No parking between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m." multiplied across the city. Enforcement budgets grew rapidly. Seattle spent $22 million on sweeps and towing in 1 year, more than on new shelter beds. Public backlash followed quickly. Advocacy groups pushed legislation to limit removals unless shelter was available. In 2025, lawmakers introduced restrictions on displacement without placement. But cities resisted, arguing that public safety required enforcement flexibility. Washington State Patrol also began targeting long-term RV parking near highways and rest areas, removing hundreds of vehicles from locations previously considered safe. The result is constant movement. Many RV residents must relocate every 48 to 72 hours to avoid tickets and towing. Surveys show that 62% of Washington vehicle dwellers have been displaced more than 5 times in 1 year. This cycle makes stability impossible. People struggle to maintain jobs when they must move constantly. Children miss school. Medical appointments are canceled. The stress of perpetual displacement compounds existing challenges. Washington's enforcement system has created a population in constant motion with no clear path to stability. While cities argue they're addressing public concerns, the displaced residents have nowhere to go. Shelter beds remain scarce, affordable housing construction lags far behind need, and the gap between enforcement and solutions continues widening. Arizona's approach to RV homelessness is shaped by state-level authority and extreme climate conditions. After court rulings in 2022 and 2023, Arizona expanded its anti-camping and vehicle habitation laws, giving cities stronger legal backing to remove encampments. Phoenix, Mesa, and Tucson now operate large-scale enforcement teams. Phoenix cleared over 1,500 sites in 2024 alone. Heat risk is a major justification officials cite. With summer temperatures regularly exceeding 115 degrees Fahrenheit, authorities argue that RV camps represent medical emergencies waiting to happen. But displacement actually makes heat exposure worse. After removals, many residents are pushed into desert outskirts with no shade, water, or services. Heat-related deaths among homeless people rose 35% from 2023 to 2025. Arizona also restricted camping on state trust land, eliminating thousands of informal parking spots that had provided refuge. Shelter capacity remains severely limited. Phoenix has beds for only 22% of its homeless population. Without housing alternatives, enforcement pushes people into genuinely life-threatening conditions. The desert environment means survival requires access to air conditioning, water, and shade. When RVs are removed from areas with these resources, residents face immediate danger. Many displaced people attempt to return to urban areas at night, creating a cycle of repeated enforcement. Citations accumulate, fines mount, and the path to stable housing becomes increasingly impossible. Arizona's enforcement system prioritizes removal over solutions. While officials cite safety concerns, the displacement itself creates the dangerous situations authorities claim to prevent. The result is a population trapped between enforcement pressure and environmental hazards with no legal place to exist. Texas doesn't have a single statewide RV policy. Instead, enforcement happens city by city, and it's spreading rapidly across the state. Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio have all expanded vehicle dwelling restrictions since 2023. Austin passed ordinances banning sleeping in vehicles in most residential and commercial zones. Dallas increased towing contracts by 40%. Houston added no overnight districts near major job centers. Texas cities issued over 28,000 camping and vehicle citations in 2024 alone. Unlike some states, Texas provides limited tenant-style protections for vehicle dwellers. Once cited, residents have few legal options or appeal processes available. Rest areas and park and ride lots were once considered safe zones. Now, many prohibit overnight stays entirely. Meanwhile, rents in major Texas cities rose 27% since 2020. Wages rose only 14%. Working families are being priced out of traditional housing and criminalized simultaneously for their survival strategies. Texas's decentralized approach means enforcement expands quietly, one city at a time, until no safe space remains. There's no coordinated state response, no statewide shelter system, and no unified housing strategy. The city-by-city model creates confusion and constant uncertainty. What's legal in one jurisdiction may be criminal in the next. RV residents must navigate a patchwork of local ordinances that change frequently. As enforcement spreads, displaced people move between cities seeking legal parking, only to find new restrictions awaiting them. The lack of statewide coordination means resources aren't pooled and solutions aren't standardized. Each city makes independent decisions, typically prioritizing removal over housing assistance. This fragmented system leaves RV residents with nowhere to turn. Florida's RV homelessness crisis is shaped by tourism economics, hurricanes, and aggressive local enforcement. With over 27 million visitors annually, coastal cities prioritize clean image policies. Miami, Tampa, Orlando, and Fort Lauderdale have expanded no camping and no overnight parking zones near beaches, resorts, and downtown districts. Since 2023, Florida cities have conducted more than 900 large-scale encampment sweeps. Miami-Dade County alone cleared over 200 RV clusters in 2 years. In 2024, Florida passed legislation strengthening penalties for public camping, allowing faster removals and higher fines. Some cities now issue citations within just 12 hours of notice. Hurricanes compound the crisis significantly. After Hurricane Ian and subsequent storms, thousands lost traditional housing and moved into RVs, but emergency parking zones closed within weeks of opening. Flooding and storm surges also destroy informal RV areas. Between 2022 and 2025, over 4,000 vehicle dwellers were displaced by storms. Shelter capacity remains severely limited. Florida has beds for only 19% of its homeless population. Many shelters close entirely during hurricane evacuations, leaving displaced people with nowhere to go. As a result, RV residents are pushed inland, away from coastal jobs and services. Many work in tourism, hospitality, and construction industries concentrated near beaches. In Florida, homelessness enforcement is tied directly to tourism revenue. Image protection comes before housing stability. Cities prioritize visitor experience over resident welfare, creating a system where working people who serve the tourism industry cannot afford to live near their jobs and face criminal penalties for parking overnight. The hurricane cycle adds unpredictable displacement, making stability impossible. Georgia's enforcement is driven largely by urban redevelopment priorities. Atlanta leads the state in RV and encampment removals. As new stadiums, tech hubs, and luxury apartments expanded, vehicle dwelling zones systematically disappeared. Between 2022 and 2025, Atlanta cleared over 350 major encampments, displacing thousands of RV residents. Many areas were rezoned for development immediately after sweeps, making return impossible. Georgia law allows cities to restrict camping on public land with extremely limited notice. In some districts, residents receive only 24 hours before removal and towing. Towing contracts grew sharply. Atlanta increased enforcement spending by 45% in 2 years. The state also expanded Highway Patrol Authority to remove long-term parked vehicles near interstates and exit ramps. Hundreds of RVs were removed from roadside zones that had been tolerated for years. Georgia's homeless population grew by 26% since 2020, while affordable housing construction fell by 18%. The gap between need and supply continues widening. Shelter beds are concentrated in downtown areas. Suburban zones offer almost no alternatives for displaced residents. When sweeps happen, people are pushed farther from public transit, healthcare facilities, and employment centers. Georgia's approach reflects a larger national trend: development first, displacement second, housing solutions last. The economic priorities of real estate development take precedence over human needs. As Atlanta positions itself as a growing tech and business hub, the pressure on low-income residents intensifies. RV dwellers represent visible poverty in areas targeted for upscale transformation. Their removal serves aesthetic and economic goals rather than addressing the underlying housing crisis that created vehicle homelessness in the first place. Colorado's RV enforcement is driven by climate concerns and tourism economics. Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs, and mountain resort towns have expanded restrictions on vehicle dwelling since 2023. Denver alone removed over 1,000 vehicle encampments in 2024. Boulder banned overnight parking in most zones, reducing legal parking options by 70%. Officials cite wildfire risk, propane storage dangers, and blocked snow routes as reasons for removals. Winter plowing access is frequently used to justify emergency clearing operations, but displacement creates severe cold exposure risks. In winter 2024, temperatures dropped below -15 degrees Fahrenheit in parts of Colorado. Homeless outreach teams recorded a 41% increase in hypothermia cases following major sweeps. Many RV residents are pushed into high-altitude areas without electrical hookups or water access. Heating fuel costs can exceed $200 per month, completely unaffordable for most vehicle dwellers. Tourism also drives enforcement. Ski towns restrict RV parking to preserve visitor experience and maintain upscale aesthetics. Seasonal bans are common in resort areas. Colorado spends over $450 million annually on homelessness programs, yet less than 30% goes toward long-term housing construction. The rest funds enforcement operations and emergency response. In mountain states like Colorado, displacement often means survival against nature itself. Sub-zero temperatures turn enforcement into a potential death sentence for those without shelter alternatives. The mountain environment makes vehicle living particularly dangerous. Altitude increases cold stress, snow restricts movement, and emergency services may be hours away. When enforcement removes RVs from urban areas with some infrastructure, people face immediate survival challenges in harsh conditions with no support systems. Nevada's enforcement is heavily concentrated around Las Vegas and Reno. Las Vegas hosts over 40 million tourists annually, making image control central to policy decisions. Clark County expanded no habitation zones around the Strip, stadiums, and convention centers. RV parking within miles of major venues is completely prohibited overnight. Since 2023, Las Vegas removed over 2,500 vehicles from public areas. Reno followed a similar path, clearing riverfront and industrial zones to attract development and investment. Nevada law allows rapid enforcement for public nuisance violations. Removal notices can be as short as 24 hours, giving residents almost no time to relocate or challenge citations. Water scarcity is also cited as justification. Officials argue that unauthorized RV settlements strain limited infrastructure in the desert environment. But Nevada's shelter system is one of the smallest per capita in the western United States. Only 16% of homeless residents can access shelter beds on any given night. Desert relocation dramatically increases health risks. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Vehicle interiors reach lethal levels within hours. Heat-related deaths among the homeless in Clark County rose 38% between 2022 and 2025. Nevada's tourism economy directly drives policy decisions, and RV residents pay the price with their health and safety. The casino and convention industries generate billions in revenue. Officials prioritize maintaining an upscale image for visitors, while the workers who support that economy cannot afford housing. Enforcement removes visible poverty from tourist corridors, but offers no alternative housing, creating a population constantly displaced in one of America's most dangerous climates. Utah's enforcement reflects a combination of conservative governance and severely limited housing stock. Salt Lake City, Provo, and Ogden expanded anti-camping and vehicle-dwelling laws after 2023. Overnight parking is now banned in most residential and commercial zones. Salt Lake City cleared over 600 encampments in 2024 alone, many involving RVs and other vehicles. Utah emphasizes what officials call compassionate enforcement, offering shelter before removal. But capacity is extremely low. The state has beds for only 21% of its homeless population. Many shelters are faith-based, requiring participation in religious programs and services. Some RV residents decline these requirements, leaving them ineligible for the limited assistance available. Housing costs have risen dramatically. Since 2020, rents increased 31%, while median income rose only 13%. The gap between wages and housing costs continues widening. Utah also restricts long-term parking near churches, schools, and government buildings, eliminating traditional safe zones where RVs had previously been tolerated. Winter adds additional pressure. Sub-zero temperatures push authorities to clear camps for safety reasons, even without housing alternatives. Officials argue they're protecting people from freezing, but displacement often increases exposure to dangerous cold. Utah's system relies heavily on moral framing, encouraging compliance without providing enough actual exits from homelessness. The religious influence shapes both the rhetoric and the limited services available. The result is polite displacement, repeated endlessly. Authorities use compassionate language while implementing policies that create constant movement. The emphasis on personal responsibility and faith-based solutions cannot address the structural housing shortage that drives vehicle homelessness in the first place. Idaho's enforcement expanded rapidly after national court rulings weakened legal protections for homeless residents. Cities like Boise, Meridian, and Nampa passed stricter anti-camping and vehicle habitation ordinances between 2023 and 2025. Boise alone issued over 4,800 camping and vehicle citations in 2024. Before these legal changes, riverbanks, industrial zones, and public lands served as informal RV parking areas. Most of these locations have now been closed to overnight use. State land agencies increased patrols by 32%, specifically targeting long-term vehicle dwellers on trust land and wildlife management areas. Idaho's homeless population grew by 29% since 2020, while affordable housing construction dropped by 21%. The gap between need and supply continues expanding. Shelter capacity remains severely limited. Only 17% of unhoused residents can access beds on any given night. Cold weather is a major factor in Idaho's crisis. Winter temperatures frequently fall below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Outreach teams recorded a 36% increase in frostbite and cold-related injuries immediately following major sweeps. Rural displacement is common. When Boise clears RV zones, many residents relocate to remote highways and forest edges where emergency services are scarce or non-existent. Idaho's approach emphasizes law and order over housing investment, leaving RV residents with fewer legal and physical safe spaces each year. The court rulings gave cities broader authority to remove encampments without providing shelter alternatives first. Idaho quickly exercised this authority, implementing aggressive enforcement while shelter construction lagged far behind. The combination of legal changes, harsh winter climate, and limited housing options creates life-threatening situations for displaced vehicle dwellers. Michigan's RV homelessness crisis is tied directly to long-term industrial decline and rising housing costs. Detroit, Flint, Grand Rapids, and Lansing have expanded enforcement using parking codes and nuisance laws rather than direct anti-camping bans. Detroit issued more than 6,200 parking and habitation citations in 2024 specifically targeting vehicle dwellers. Grand Rapids increased towing operations by 28%. Officials frame removals as neighborhood protection and blight reduction rather than homelessness enforcement, using legal language that avoids constitutional challenges. But economic reality tells a different story. Since 2020, Michigan rents increased 24%, while manufacturing wages rose only 11%. Thousands of laid-off auto workers and warehouse employees turned to vehicles for housing. Winter is deadly in Michigan. The state recorded over 90 cold-related deaths among unhoused residents between 2023 and 2025. Many RV residents cluster near factories and logistics hubs to maintain employment access. When these zones are cleared through parking enforcement, people lose both shelter and job proximity simultaneously. Shelter availability is extremely limited outside Detroit. Rural counties often have 0 emergency beds available. Michigan spends less than 0.4% of its state budget on homelessness programs, among the lowest rates in the Midwest region. As a result, enforcement far outpaces assistance. Cities remove RVs faster than housing solutions can develop. The industrial decline that drove Michigan's economic struggles continues impacting working families. Manufacturing job losses created initial housing instability, and parking code enforcement criminalizes the survival strategies people adopted. Without addressing the economic roots or investing in housing, Michigan's approach simply moves poverty from one location to another. Pennsylvania's RV enforcement is concentrated in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and surrounding suburbs. Philadelphia cleared over 450 encampments in 2024, many involving vehicle dwellers. Parking restrictions expanded dramatically around transit corridors and redevelopment zones. SEPTA and city police increased patrols near train stations, removing long-term parked RVs to maintain what officials call commuter safety and station aesthetics. Pittsburgh followed similar policies, especially near hospitals, universities, and medical district expansion areas. Between 2022 and 2025, parking-related citations specifically targeting vehicle residents rose 41% statewide. Housing costs are rising rapidly across Pennsylvania. Rents increased 26% since 2020, while median wages rose only 14%. The gap continues widening each year. At the same time, the state lost over 9,000 public housing units due to aging infrastructure and lack of maintenance funding. Shelters are severely overcrowded. Philadelphia's average shelter occupancy exceeds 96% year-round, leaving almost no availability for newly displaced people. Suburban counties provide few alternatives, forcing displaced residents to return to cities repeatedly. Many RV dwellers work in healthcare, food service, and logistics industries. Displacement disrupts not only housing, but employment arrangements and childcare access. Pennsylvania's transit-focused enforcement prioritizes mobility infrastructure and commercial activity over housing security. The emphasis on clearing areas near public transportation means people lose access to the very transit systems they need for work. Pushing RVs away from stations forces longer commutes or complete job loss. The transit-oriented approach reflects broader priorities. Economic activity and commuter convenience take precedence over the housing needs of working poor residents who often serve those same transit-dependent commuters. Ohio's enforcement relies heavily on public safety and health codes rather than direct camping bans. Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton expanded nuisance and sanitation ordinances between 2023 and 2025. Columbus removed over 700 encampments in 2024 alone. Cleveland increased vehicle towing by 34%, specifically targeting RVs and converted vans. Cities cite trash accumulation, fire risk, and flooding concerns along riverbanks and highway underpasses as primary justifications for enforcement. But Ohio's housing shortage is severe. The state lacks over 260,000 affordable housing units, creating impossible pressure on low-income residents. Rents rose 23% since 2020, while wages rose only 12%. The income gap makes traditional housing increasingly unattainable. Many displaced RV residents move constantly between industrial zones, rest areas, and abandoned parking lots, seeking any temporary refuge. Flooding is a major risk in Ohio. In 2025, heavy rains displaced over 1,200 homeless residents along Ohio River corridors, destroying vehicles and belongings. Shelter coverage remains extremely low. Only 20% of homeless residents can access beds on any given night. Ohio's system emphasizes compliance and cleanup operations without addressing root causes of homelessness. The result is constant movement with no pathway out of vehicle dwelling. Health code enforcement sounds less punitive than camping bans, but achieves the same displacement effect. By framing enforcement as public health protection rather than homeless removal, cities avoid constitutional challenges while achieving the same goal. RV residents face citations regardless of legal terminology. The emphasis on sanitation and safety allows cities to clear areas quickly while claiming to protect both housed residents and the displaced population itself. North Carolina's RV homelessness crisis is driven by rapid population growth and restrictive zoning laws. Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, and Asheville expanded parking and camping bans after 2023. Overnight parking is prohibited in most suburban zones. Charlotte cleared over 300 encampments in 2024 alone. Raleigh doubled enforcement staffing to handle increased sweep operations. As tech sector and finance jobs expanded, housing costs surged dramatically. Rents increased 29% since 2020, while entry-level wages rose only 13%. Zoning laws severely restrict mobile home parks and RV parks, limiting legal alternatives for low-income residents. North Carolina lost over 40% of its low-cost trailer parks since 2000 due to redevelopment pressure. Hurricane displacement also plays a significant role. Storms in eastern counties pushed thousands into temporary RV living as emergency housing. But emergency parking zones closed within months, leaving displaced families with nowhere to go. Shelter capacity is extremely uneven across the state. Rural counties often have zero emergency beds available. As cities grow wealthier through job growth and development, physical space for low-income residents systematically disappears. North Carolina's enforcement reflects a broader pattern: economic growth without inclusion. The jobs created don't pay enough for workers to afford housing in the same cities where they're employed. The rapid transformation means longtime residents and service workers are priced out simultaneously. Zoning restrictions prevent affordable housing development, while enforcement removes the survival strategies people adopted. The combination creates a population with stable employment, but no legal place to live. Economic growth enriches some while criminalizing others, with RV enforcement serving as the mechanism that removes visible poverty from prosperous areas. This isn't homelessness anymore. It's a slow-motion eviction of the working class. If you've seen this happening in your city, tell us in the comments. And don't miss our next video, where we expose which states are expanding these crackdowns even further.